A pretty big cool down is coming to the United States. We have one coming in pretty soon, but then another one right after that, surging down into the United States. We're going to be talking about how this could potentially cause something like this. If everything lines up just right, we could have yet another major snowstorm in the south. And if not, at the very least, the pattern will support it. Really depends on whether or not this low pressure system will form in the first place, and we'll be talking about those chances in today's video. Current radar across the United States, you can see that we do still have some snow ongoing with the lake effect snow event in full effect over here south of Kingston and also south of Rochester. We're expecting a foot to maybe even up to 2 feet of snow around where these bands set up. Also, a little bit of extra snow is trying to work its way into parts of Indiana, and that will eventually move into Ohio as well. Still some lake effect kind of happening up here in northern and southern Michigan, and also up here in the UP of Michigan as well. Across the country, though, you can see it is pretty uneventful. Looking at the moisture content of our country, you can see we got a lot of these orange colors and yellow colors around in the country. All of that is that drier air. It's going to be parking itself into the United States for quite a while. So keep thunderstorm activity and snow activity a little bit low over the beginning of the week. But as we move into the later portion of this week, things could get interesting. In terms of our weather warnings and watches, we do have some winter weather advisories ongoing up here. It's mainly going to be for lake effect snow, but also all the way down here into Southern California, we still have these red flag warnings, and they have not dropped the warning of particularly dangerous situation, a PDS, red flag warning, which is not good, as they are calling for low humidity and 55 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts across some of these regions. So again, if you guys live in this area, make sure you're going to be weather aware and fire aware today, going into tomorrow as well. We'll be breaking that down a little bit more in detail at the end of the forecast. One of the things that we've been monitoring like a hawk for our future weather potential for big storms, big snowstorms, and potentially even some severe weather is we've been watching these high pressure systems, these ridges kind of set up here south of Alaska. And one of them is about to kind of move down into the United States. That's still progged by some of these models to happen. And then a new one replaces that. And this is going to be our high pressure system that's going to be responsible for slingshotting some of that Arctic air down into the United States. And that's why we're expecting quite the cool down. And that cool down, if there's enough moisture, will obviously bring some chances for some heavy snow yet again. As we push this more into the future, you can see that ridge really starts to build here. We start to get some of those really blue colors start to pop back up here. And that is that low pressure system that's eventually going to be tapping in to that Arctic air, really pulling it down into the United States. And then eventually it's going to slowly progress off to the east and then exit our country onto the north, where it does kind of seem like our ridge will start to degrade there as we go into the future. But then another one comes in and kind of reinforces it. So does that mean we're going to be getting even colder temperatures again on the backside of this? That certainly seems possible as we go into later January, but we've got to watch out, see how these models progress. So assessing our snow potential, it's really going to matter a lot where our jet stream sets up. You can see as we go into the 16th, it's a little bit zonal flow there. And then eventually we see another kink in the jet stream as we go into the 19th and the 20th here. And you can really see that it starts to kind of push up and organize a little bit more there in the eastern portion of the United States. You can see how it kind of starts off a little bit flat there. There's your subtropical jet phasing with our polar jet. And where these two meet is where the moisture and that cold and dry air are going to meet, forming a low pressure system and potentially a major snowstorm down here in the southeast. But details are still pretty scant right now in terms of whether or not it will form. But man, the fact that that overall pattern is still setting up here across the United States is indicating to me that signals are increasing, at the very least, for a very cold end of January. A pretty decent potential that we could get a snowstorm, start off in the southeast and maybe ride up into the northeast in the Ohio Valley. As I continue to push this through, you can see that it deepens. It's a little bit more positively tilted and then really starts to move off to the eastern coast. If we can keep this and a low pressure system does form, there's going to be a little bit of a heightened chance here for a nor'easter. Now, it's not going to be guaranteed by any means, but again, the pattern is there. It's a little bit favorable for that. It's not the best pattern that we've ever had for a nor'easter, but when you have a jet stream kind of set up like this and maybe a low pressure system with enough moisture, you could definitely definitely get something spin up and move along the Atlantic coast. Another big factor that we got to watch out for is those temperature anomalies. Where are they setting up? Where is it going to be cold enough for snow? So looks like we're going to be continuing to be in a below average temperature regimen here for the next couple of days. But then as we go into the 16th, you can see that ridge that's going to be coming down from Alaska into the United States. It's going to kind of park itself for just a tad on the 17th over here in the northern plains going into the southeast and the southern plains as well. That eventually, though, moves out pretty quickly. And then on the back side of that, on the east side of our ridge over here near Alaska, that builds back in, we really start to see that cold air get slingshot into the United States. And man, does it look like it's going to be cold here, potentially all the way down into Mexico. We can have anywhere from 16 to 20 degrees below average here. And again, this is just our EPS model, which is tons of models all smushed together, giving us an average. Okay, so it could potentially be a little bit colder than this as we actually get there. So just keep that in mind. And then when you factor in those wind chill, folks, this could easily be the coldest air that we've seen this year. But yeah, where you have that cold and that jet stream orientation, which is about at this point, digging down into the south, moving up into the northeast, you can see that we're kind of set up here for a low pressure system to kind of form down here in the southeast and to move up to the north. And there are some signals on our deterministic models that are showing a storm. Looking at the latest Euro model run, which I guess you could say comes from the family tree of the EPS model. You could say the EPS model is like a giant family all singing at unison, and then the average of their voice is what you hear or what you see on the models. And the Euro model, the more deterministic run, is like one singular person of that family singing, and you can hear their voice clearly. Though in terms of predicting the future, still not the best thing to look at, but it can give us an idea of what is possible. So as I push this forward into time, you can see that some more snow up there near the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley is still possible. And then eventually, as we get that warm up happen here across the country, we could have another storm system develop here, bringing some more snow, maybe a little bit heavier there into the Ohio Valley, moving up into the northeast as well, bringing some decent snowfall there, and then mainly rain down in the southeast, maybe a little bit of severe weather. And then as we continue to push this forward into the future, you can see that the Euro picks up on some moisture down there in the Gulf of Mexico, and eventually it tries to spin up here on the southern Texas coast, potentially even bringing some snow down there. But again, super far out here, not really trusted any of these models at this point, but it does kind of give us an understanding of some different scenarios here on what is possible. And as I push this forward, you can see that that low pressure system over there near Texas, which is supported by the overall pattern like we just went over, does form here on the Euro, but it really doesn't do much. It kind of tries to produce some snow, but it's just suppressed too far down to the south and doesn't really phase too well with that energy up to the north. The GFS is saying something completely different. So let's go and look at that. So looking at the GFS model, you can see pushing it into time still says, kind of like the Euro, some snow chances up there, up in the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, and also the Northeast. Then we get the other system come in, potentially bringing some snow back into the Ohio Valley a little bit heavier. So we do have agreement for this system, but where that rain snow line sets up is going to jump around as we get closer. But we're within the 5-day range, so it's not crazy to think that this is going to happen here. And that snow moves up into the Northeast, potentially bringing some snow as far south as West Virginia, Kentucky, and maybe even Tennessee, which is a little bit further north than what it said yesterday. But then, look at that. Over there near the East Coast, a little hint of a storm that maybe if it had a little bit more energy, a little bit better orientation with some of the energy that is out there, could have been a nor'easter, but it just kind of fizzles, doesn't really intensify, and maybe bring some scant snow over there to New Jersey and New England. Now look at this down here, going into the 20th, the GFS is picking up on that signal of a low pressure system trying to form here in Texas. But look at this, as I push this forward, you can see that the timing here between the cold air, the energy to the north, phasing with this low pressure system is a lot more on point than the Euro model. So what that essentially means is that this is going to be a stronger snowstorm with a lot of that freezing rain to the south. And as we go into the overnight hours, when it gets a little bit cooler on the 22nd into the morning, you can really see that this thing starts to dump a lot of heavy snow all the way across the region. It really does bring up some similarities to the last southern storm that we had. And eventually that system rides up the East Coast, doesn't really intensify, and brings a little bit more snow up there to maybe like Maryland and Delaware, then exits out of our hair without becoming a nor'easter. Now, could that change in the future? Absolutely. Can this down here change in the future? Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, we're looking really far out on these models. We're past 10 or almost up to 10 days out here. And you can see there are significant differences between what the GFS says and the Euro. The Euro has a lot more of a southern track, kind of stays over the Gulf of Mexico, tries to come up to the north and just doesn't really do much. And then the GFS is bringing a track similar to like this, kind of trying to work its way up, but doesn't really intensify either. So we've got to watch for both of those scenarios. Again, it's not the most favorable pattern for a nor'easter, so that's why we're not even seeing some of our fantasy runs pick one up, but it's definitely a more favorable pattern for a southern snowstorm down here in the southeast and the southern plains. So I don't think that this scenario is completely far-fetched. It's definitely something that we're going to have to watch out for as this next weather pattern starts to set up. Now, in terms of just how cold it can feel in the United States as that cooler air filters back down into the country, first we're going to have to deal with this cold air. It's going to be coming over the next couple of days, bringing some negative degree temperatures, potentially as far south as the Ohio Valley. Negative 11 degree temperatures there in Indiana. It's going to be cold. Negative 21 degrees up there in northern Minnesota is quite impressive. Now, as that moves off to the east, eventually we're going to be seeing that warm-up creep back in. You see 50s and 60s all the way down here in Texas, and also moving into parts of the southeast as well. That's going to continue to kind of push off to the east with some 60s to 50s, really starting to build up there in Louisiana, Mississippi, and parts of Alabama. But look up here. Look at all of this cooler air. I mean, this is Arctic air about to surge into our country here. Really negative 40-degree temperatures within this. And again, we're looking at the heat index and the wind chill as well. Watch this as I push this into the future. That really tries to dive down into the country on the 19th. Negative 38-degree temperatures all the way up there in North Dakota. Negative 20-degree temperatures making it down into South Dakota. Also, northern Minnesota in those negative 40s as well. This is looking like very cold temperatures. I mean, even as far south as Kansas, we're seeing -2, -3 degrees. Down here in Oklahoma and even Texas, we're in the teens. Also, those teens are starting to make it into the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, and also Arkansas. And as I continue to push this forward, you can see those teens and negatives really try to work its way down, with potentially one of our coldest days here being on the 20th with negative 40-degree temperatures up here in North Dakota and parts of Minnesota. Negative 30-degree temperatures starting to make its way down into Wisconsin. And remembering this is factoring in the wind chill that is going to be possible. So this is the feels like temperature. It's going to feel very cold with negatives trying to make it all the way down into parts of northern Oklahoma, northern Arkansas, and even down into the southeast a little bit, with single digits almost all the way down to the coast here in Texas. So we're looking at a big freeze here, folks. Last time we had a big freeze, a lot of the southeast and the southern plains pipes burst. Me personally, my pipes bursted and my entire house flooded, and I had to stay at my parents' house for about a year as I waited for my house to get repaired and remodeled. And if you're outside for more than like a couple of minutes in some of these negative 40 degrees, we're talking about deadly cold here. And it's going to be widespread. Again, this is going to be the coldest day of this year. It's really setting up to be like that. I really don't see any significant changes in the overall pattern. Could be a little bit warmer than this, but still, even just a little bit warmer, we're still way colder than we've been all year long. And as I continue to push this into the future, you can see those temperatures aren't going to go away anytime soon. Going into the 21st, negative 20 to 30 degree temperatures try to make it down there into Ohio and Pennsylvania. They start to move out a little bit over here in the northern plains, but we're still talking about those negative degree temperatures as far south as Tennessee, moving into South Carolina and Virginia. This is really setting up to be a very cold pattern here. And then eventually it warms up, but I am curious to see what happens when that next blocking pattern comes in and see what the future models are saying. Yeah, potentially another little bit of a cold blast behind that as well, but we're looking really far out into the future. But it's not far-fetched to think that as long as we get that new blocking high pressure move into southern Alaska, we could easily see yet another cold shot, but it looks like it might not be as cold as this one. But all right, everybody, thank you again for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button, and also turn on the post notifications if you did end up enjoying this video. And I will see you guys on the next forecast. Take it easy.